This opening slide introduces the paper as a multidisciplinary legal accounting study, emphasizing that the presentation examines AI not simply as a detection tool, but as a governance challenge involving evidence, accountability, and assurance in institutional settings, including ERA. Corresponding author, Assistant Prof. Aymen Almayyahi. Use this slide to orient the audience. Explain that the presentation moves from the macro context of enabled fraud to the specific methodological design, then to the paper's analytical contribution, a framework that links algorithmic performance with the legal reliability and professional accountability. State that AI is not only a technical enhancement, it is also a shift in the epistemology of assurance. Auditors and the courts are no longer evaluating merely human-generated judgments or deterministic rules. They are increasingly asked to rely on probabilistic machine outputs. Frame the problem as a dual gap. On one side, I can identify suspicious patterns at scale. On the other, legal and accounting frameworks are not fully prepared to assign responsibility when systems fail or to accept AI-generated outputs as reliable evidence. Emphasize that the paper is not narrowly technical. Its significance is multidisciplinary. It informs scholars, regulators, legal practitioners, and auditors. In particular, it helps explain how AI adoption can be aligned with accountability instead of undermining professional and institutional trust. State the aim succinctly, then unpack the objectives. The study does not ask only whether AI works. It asks whether its outputs can be trusted, explained, governed, and incorporated into professional and judicial decision-making without awakening accountability. Sources. Attach the research paper, The Role of Artificial Intelligence in Fraud Detection, a legal accounting analysis of accountability and reliability. Explain that the paper is answered in two central questions. The first is evidentiary. Can AI outputs meet standards of reliability? The second is institutional. When AI fails, who is responsible for the consequences, and how should that responsibility be structured? Present the hypothesis as a balanced proposition. The paper does not reject AI. Instead, it argues that performance gains are real, but their institutional value depends on complementary controls, explainability, validation, legal standards, and professional oversight. Explain the theoretical logic. Agency theory helps us think about delegated oversight and monitoring failure. Socio-technical systems theory reminds us that AI systems do not operate in isolation. They are embedded in human institutions, standards, and workflows. Summarize the core literature trend. The field has moved from limited, retrospective review toward predictive and anomaly-driven assurance. Stress that AI's analytical advantages are well established in the literature, which makes the unresolved governance issues even more important. Explain that the legal and regulatory landscape is evolving, but unevenly. The literature suggests a move toward higher scrutiny for AI outputs, especially in high-risk domains like fraud detection. This supports The paper's argument that technical performance alone is insufficient. Use this slide to identify the precise scholarly value of the paper. The contribution is the bridge. It connects the technical language of anomaly detection with the legal language of admissibility and the professional language of audit assurance. Describe the methodology as intentionally dual. The simulation provides an empirical basis for discussing how IBEVs in a realistic fraud detection scenario. The doctrinal analysis then asks whether those outputs can be defended in professional and legal forums. Explain that the legal analysis is comparative and doctrinal rather than jurisdiction-specific black-letter exposition. Its purpose is to test whether outputs can cross the threshold from operational alerts to institutionally usable evidence and professionally defensible conclusions. Clarify that the simulation is illustrative rather than a claim about a real institutional dataset. Its value lies in showing how I can identify suspicious multidimensional combinations and why such outputs require interpretation before they become evidence or audit conclusions. Explain that the model's logic is multidimensional. This matters because legal and audit environments often want a simple reason for each flag, while systems frequently rely on interactions among several features. The tension becomes central to accountability and reliability. Present the quantitative headline clearly. 21 out of 1000 transactions were flagged as anomalies. Explain that the model identified several distinct suspicious patterns, reinforcing the claim that I can detect structural anomalies beyond simple rules or thresholds. Walk the audience through the visual rather than reading it literally. Emphasize that anomaly detection works through pattern interaction. A strong vendor score does not automatically neutralize suspicion when other factors create structural irregularity. Stress the distinction between detection and decision. I can surface risk efficiently, but institutional action still depends on human professionals who can interpret, validate, and explain the findings to stakeholders, regulators, or courts. Explain the central tension of the paper. Better detection does not automatically produce better governance. In fact, stronger systems can intensify institutional risks when responsibility is fragmented and explanations are too weak for legal or professional scrutiny. Describe the framework from top to bottom. At the governance layer, rules and standards define acceptable use and liability. The middle layer contains the intelligent assurance mechanisms, detection, explainability, validation, and triage. The operational layer is where transactions and work papers are generated and escalated. Explain that the operational logic of the framework is sequential and controlled. I identifies candidates for review. ERPay can automate routine checks, and the human professionals decide whether the matter should proceed to internal escalation or legal action. Make it clear that the paper's reform agenda is broader than legislation alone. It includes standard setting, documentation, validation, and clearer allocation of responsibility. The objective is to make AI outputs both operationally useful and institutionally defensible. Use this slide to translate the framework into action. The message is that AI adoption requires coordinated institutional preparation, legal standards, audit practice updates, internal controls over automated tools, and broader digital capability building. Close by restating the paper's core message. AI will matter most where governance is strong enough to make its outputs accountable, interpretable, and professionally usable. Invite questions on legal admissibility, audit practice, or institutional reform pathways.